I, Abigail Cooper, 28 years old, never thought I'd come face to face with the man who destroyed my family. Yet there he was, signing a document at table 7, using the exact signature I'd recognize anywhere. My father's signature. Before I dive into this wild ride, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button and like this video if you've ever had that moment where your entire world turned upside down in seconds. Trust me, after hearing my story, you'll never look at successful people the same way again. Let me take you back to that night at the Ivory, the upscale restaurant in Manhattan where I've been waitressing for the past 3 years. It's not where I imagined I'd end up after studying business for 2 years in college, but life had other plans. With my mother's chronic health issues and the mountain of student loan debt I'd accumulated before having to drop out, I needed steady income and the generous tips that came with serving New York's elite. The Ivory isn't your average restaurant. Our clientele consists of Wall Street executives, Fortune 500 CEOs, celebrities, and politicians. On any given night, the combined net worth in our dining room could solve world hunger. Most waitstaff are intimidated, but I've always had this uncanny ability to remember details, faces, names, orders, and yes, signatures. That particular Tuesday evening, the restaurant was buzzing with its usual energy. I was assigned to Section 3, which included Table 7, our most prestigious corner spot with views of both Central Park and the city skyline. The reservation was for Raymond Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Industries, and 4 associates. Anyone working in New York knows Raymond Blackwell. His face is plastered on business magazines and billboards. With an estimated net worth of $11.8 billion, he's practically royalty in the financial world. Self-made billionaire. Genius investor. Philanthropist. American success story. I'd served his table twice before, and he was neither particularly kind nor cruel, just another powerful man accustomed to being served. That night, they were discussing some major merger over their perfectly seared scallops and $500 bottles of wine. I wasn't eavesdropping intentionally, but I caught snippets about regulatory approval and shareholder vote as I refilled water glasses and brought out the next course. Near the end of their meal, as I cleared dessert plates, one of the associates pulled out a leather portfolio containing several documents. "We need your signature tonight if we want to move forward with the Hong Kong deal by morning," the associate said. Raymond nodded, pulled an expensive fountain pen from his suit pocket, and began signing. I was standing right beside him, and that's when I saw it, the fluid motion of his hand creating the distinctive cursive I hadn't seen in 16 years but would recognize anywhere. William Cooper's signature. My father's signature. My hands froze midair as I was reaching for an empty wine glass. The world around me seemed to slow down as memories flooded back, Dad teaching me to ride a bike, helping with math homework at the kitchen table, his laugh when Mom told her corny jokes. Then the darker memories, the day he disappeared when I was 12, Mom crying for weeks, the foreclosure notice, moving from our comfortable suburban home to a tiny apartment in Queens. Without thinking, the words tumbled out of my mouth, "That's my dad's signature." The table went silent. Raymond's pen stopped mid-stroke. 5 pairs of eyes turned to me with expressions ranging from confusion to irritation. Raymond's face, however, was completely unreadable as he stared at me. "Excuse me," he said, voice perfectly controlled. Immediate regret washed over me. I'd spent years learning to keep my thoughts to myself while serving demanding customers. Why had I chosen this moment, with this particular customer, to blurt out something so personal and bizarre? "I'm so sorry, sir. The signature reminded me of someone. Please forgive the interruption." I hurriedly finished clearing the table and retreated to the kitchen, heart pounding in my chest. From the corner of my eye, I could see Raymond watching me leave, his expression now calculating and cold. I didn't know it then, but recognizing that signature would unravel a web of lies that had destroyed my family's life and would give me the chance to make things right, once and for all. "Abigail, this is completely unacceptable behavior," Gordon, the restaurant manager, said the next morning in his office. His balding head glistened under the fluorescent lights as he paced back and forth. Mr. Blackwell is one of our most valuable clients. Do you understand what kind of position you put us in with your personal outburst? I stared at my hands folded in my lap, stomach churning with anxiety. I understand, sir. It won't happen again. It better not. The only reason you're not fired is because you've been reliable until now, and because we're short-staffed this season. He stopped pacing to fix me with a stern look. You're on probation for the next month. One more incident and you're done. Understood? Yes, sir. Thank you for the second chance. As I left Gordon's office, relief mingled with determination. I couldn't afford to lose this job, not with Mom's medical bills and our rent increasing next month. But I also couldn't ignore what I'd seen. Raymond Blackwell somehow had my father's exact signature, and I needed to know why. Growing up, we had been a typical middle-class family living in a comfortable home in New Jersey. Dad worked as a financial analyst for Lambert & Pierce, a prestigious investment firm in Manhattan. Mom was a part-time school librarian. We weren't rich, but we had everything we needed, plus family vacations to the beach every summer and a decent college fund started in my name. Then, without warning, everything changed. One Tuesday in October, when I was 12, Dad didn't come home from work. At first, Mom wasn't worried, he occasionally worked late. But when midnight came and went with no call, the worry set in. By morning, she was frantic, calling hospitals and police. The official investigation revealed nothing suspicious. Dad's colleagues said he'd left work at the normal time. His car was found at the train station. No signs of foul play. No activity on his credit cards or bank accounts. He had simply vanished. The next few months were a nightmare. Not only were we dealing with the emotional devastation of losing Dad, but the financial fallout was catastrophic. We discovered Dad had withdrawn most of their savings in the weeks before his disappearance. The mortgage fell behind. Mom had to take a full-time job plus weekend work. I became a latchkey kid overnight. By the time I was 14, we'd lost our house and moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. Mom developed chronic anxiety and depression, which eventually manifested as autoimmune issues that left her in constant pain. I worked after school and weekends through high school, then tried college but had to drop out after 2 years when Mom's condition worsened. I'd spent years trying not to think about my father, channeling my hurt into caring for Mom and building some semblance of stability. Now, suddenly, all those carefully buried feelings were erupting to the surface. That evening after my shift, I sat at my tiny kitchen table in my Brooklyn apartment and opened my laptop. I typed Raymond Blackwell into the search bar, something I'd never bothered to do despite serving him at the restaurant. The results were overwhelming: news articles, interviews, company information, charity galas. According to his official biography, Raymond Blackwell had founded Blackwell Industries 15 years ago, which aligned almost perfectly with when my father disappeared. Before that, there was virtually nothing. He claimed to be from Chicago originally, had attended Wharton for his MBA, and had worked at several investment firms before striking out on his own. What struck me most was the lack of photos from earlier than 15 years ago. For someone so successful, his early life seemed suspiciously undocumented. There were professional headshots, pictures from business events, and charity galas, but nothing personal or from his youth. The next day was my day off. I took the subway to Queens to visit the storage unit where I kept some of Dad's belongings that Mom couldn't bear to look at but couldn't bring herself to throw away. I hadn't opened these boxes in years, trying to move forward rather than dwell in the past. The smell of cardboard and dust filled my nostrils as I opened the first box. Inside were Dad's personal effects, his favorite books, the baseball cap he wore to Yankees games, the watch Grandpa had given him. Beneath those items was a manila folder containing financial documents, old tax returns, and various official papers with his signature. I pulled out an old insurance form he'd signed and held it next to a printout of Raymond Blackwell signing a document at some corporate event, captured by a business news photographer. The signatures were identical, the distinctive way the W in William curved at the bottom, the sharp angle of the C in Cooper, and the peculiar loop at the end. This wasn't just a similar signature, it was the exact same handwriting. My heart racing, I gathered the documents and headed to Mom's apartment. I rarely brought up Dad with her, it usually triggered either tears or stony silence, but I needed answers. Mom was having one of her better days. She was sitting by the window, working on a crossword puzzle, her gray-streaked brown hair pulled back in a loose bun. "Mom," I said after some small talk, "I need to ask you something about Dad." Her pencil paused mid-word. "Abby, you know I don't like talking about him." "I know, but this is important." I pulled out the signature comparisons. I think Dad might be alive. And living as someone else." Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I explained what had happened at the restaurant, showed her the signatures, and shared my research on Raymond Blackwell. Instead of the shock or hope I expected, Mom's reaction was one of fear. Her hands began to tremble, and she pushed the papers away. "Leave it alone, Abby. You don't know what you're getting into." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" "Mom, if Dad is alive." I said leave it alone. Her outburst was so uncharacteristic that I fell silent. "Please, for both our sakes. Some questions are better left unanswered." She refused to say anything more, retreating to her bedroom with a sudden headache. Her reaction only strengthened my determination to find the truth. That night, I searched social media for any of Dad's old colleagues. Most had moved on to other firms, retired, or had no online presence. But one name stood out, James Mitchell. He had worked closely with Dad and had always been kind to me at company picnics. According to LinkedIn, he now ran his own financial consulting business in New Jersey. I sent him a message, not expecting much. "Mr. Mitchell, you may not remember me, but I'm William Cooper's daughter, Abigail. I'm trying to understand more about what happened when my father disappeared 16 years ago. Would you be willing to meet briefly? It would mean a lot." To my surprise, he responded within hours, "Abigail, of course I remember you. I often think about your family and what happened. I'd be happy to meet. There's a coffee shop in Hoboken called Riverfront Cafe. This Saturday 10 a.m.? That Saturday, I arrived early, nervous but determined. James Mitchell looked older than I remembered, his once dark hair now fully gray, deep lines around his eyes. But I recognized him immediately. He stood when he saw me, a sad smile crossing his face. "You look like him," he said after we exchanged greetings. Same eyes. We ordered coffee, and once the barista was out of earshot, I pulled out the signature comparisons. "Mr. Mitchell, I need to know if Raymond Blackwell is my father." His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. He carefully set it down, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "How did you figure it out?" he finally asked, his voice low. My heart jumped into my throat. "Then it's true?" He nodded slowly. "Your father got mixed up in something dangerous, Abigail. He had to disappear." "What does that mean?" "What was so dangerous that he abandoned his family without a word?" James looked pained. "It wasn't that simple. There was fraud happening at Lambert and Pierce, massive investor fraud. Hundreds of millions. Your father discovered it, but the wrong people found out he knew." He leaned closer. "These weren't people you could just report to the SEC and walk away. They had connections everywhere, government, police, even judges." "So he just left? Became someone else and left us with nothing?" The bitterness in my voice was unmistakable. "He believed he was protecting you. If they thought he was gone, they wouldn't come after his family." James hesitated. "At least, that's what he told me before he disappeared." "And Raymond Blackwell?" "A new identity. Fresh start. He used what he knew to build his own empire." James looked at me with genuine concern. "If Raymond Blackwell knows who you are, you could be in danger too. These people, they're still out there. Still powerful." I walked away from that meeting with confirmation of my suspicions and a new, devastating truth: my father hadn't died or been kidnapped. He had deliberately abandoned us, faked his disappearance, and reinvented himself as a billionaire while his family lost everything. Back in my apartment, I finally allowed myself to break down. I cried for hours for the confused 12-year-old girl who lost her father, for my mother who suffered for years, for the life we should have had. But as the tears dried, they were replaced by something stronger: determination. I deserved to know the truth, and more importantly, my mother deserved justice. The Ivory wasn't just a job anymore, it had become my battlefield. Every shift was an opportunity to gather intelligence, to get one step closer to the truth about the man who called himself Raymond Blackwell. "Hey, Lisa, how's the reservation book looking tonight?" I asked casually as I fixed my apron in the staff room. Lisa Taylor had been the hostess at the Ivory for 5 years and controlled the seating arrangements with military precision. "Packed as usual," she replied, applying a fresh coat of lipstick. "That tech billionaire with the weird laugh is back, and the Hendersons are celebrating their anniversary." "What about Blackwell?" "He's been coming in a lot lately." I tried to sound nonchalant, like I was making casual conversation. "Raymond Blackwell?" Lisa raised an eyebrow. "He's becoming a regular. Has a standing reservation every Tuesday at 8, and often pops in on Fridays for lunch meetings." Over the next few weeks, I cultivated my friendship with Lisa, bringing her favorite coffee from the shop next door, covering her section when she needed to take personal calls. Eventually, she was comfortable enough to share Blackwell's complete dining schedule with me, including which associates typically joined him. But I needed more than just his dinner habits. On my day off, I visited the New York Public Library to search old news archives that weren't easily accessible online. In the quiet basement level, surrounded by microfiche readers and the musty smell of old newspapers, I searched for anything related to Lambert and Pierce from around the time of Dad's disappearance. After hours of searching, I found a small article buried in the business section of the Wall Street Journal from October 2009, just after Dad vanished. "Financial fraud investigation targets Lambert and Pierce executives." Federal authorities are investigating allegations of securities fraud at prestigious investment firm Lambert and Pierce. Several executives are under scrutiny for potentially misleading investors about fund performance and misappropriating client funds. No charges have been filed yet as the investigation continues. 2 months later, a follow-up piece appeared. Lambert and Pierce fraud case hits dead end. The investigation into alleged securities fraud at Lambert and Pierce has been closed due to insufficient evidence, according to sources close to the case. The probe, which had targeted several high-ranking executives, failed to produce charges. In related news, Kenneth Reynolds, former VP of operations at the firm who was reported to be cooperating with authorities, was found dead in his home last week of an apparent suicide. Kenneth Reynolds. The name rang a bell. He had come to our house for dinner once or twice when I was younger. Dad had called him one of the good ones at the firm. With this new information, I tracked down Reynolds' widow, Eleanor, now living in a modest home in Connecticut. I called ahead, explaining I was William Cooper's daughter, researching what happened at Lambert and Pierce. She agreed to meet, though her voice was hesitant. Eleanor Reynolds was in her 60s, with silver hair and a face that spoke of past beauty now weathered by grief. She invited me in for tea, studying me carefully as we sat in her sunroom. "You have your father's eyes," she said, echoing James Mitchell's comment. "Mrs. Reynolds, I'm trying to understand what really happened back then," I began. "The official story about your husband's death was a lie," she interrupted, her voice suddenly hard. "Kenneth wasn't a suicide. He was going to testify. Then suddenly he was dead." A chill ran down my spine. Testify about what? The fraud, of course. Lambert and Pierce was running a massive Ponzi scheme. They were reporting false returns, using new investor money to pay established clients, skimming millions off the top. She set her teacup down with a clatter. Kenneth discovered it accidentally. He was horrified. He went to the authorities secretly, gathered evidence. And my father? Was he involved? Eleanor's expression softened slightly. William was Kenneth's partner. They were gathering evidence together. Your father had extensive documentation, transactions, account numbers, names of everyone involved. Kenneth said William called it their insurance policy. She paused. Then your father vanished, and a week later, Kenneth was dead. The police ruled it a suicide, I said quietly. The police ruled it whatever they were told to rule it, Eleanor replied bitterly. Kenneth had no history of depression. He was excited about bringing the truth to light. He left no note. And most tellingly, he was right-handed, but the gun was found in his left hand. My mind was reeling. So my father. Your father saved himself and left everyone else to burn, she said, her voice cracking slightly. I'm sorry to be blunt, but that's what happened. He had the evidence that could have brought the whole scheme down, and he disappeared with it. Without him, the case fell apart. The people responsible walked away clean, went on to other firms, other schemes. I felt sick. Was she right? Had my father been involved in illegal activities, then fled to save himself? But if so, why become Raymond Blackwell, a highly public figure? My next stop was tracking down Megan Lewis, my father's former secretary at Lambert and Pierce. It took several days of searching and a few dead ends before I found her working as an office manager at a law firm in Brooklyn. She was initially reluctant to speak with me, but when I mentioned Kenneth Reynolds' death, something in her expression changed. Your father wasn't like the others, she said as we sat at a cafe after her workday ended. He was genuinely horrified when he figured out what was happening. He came in late one night, and I was still there finishing up some reports. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. What happened? I pressed. He told me he'd discovered something terrible, that people were going to get hurt. He started staying late every night, copying documents, making recordings of conversations. She twisted her napkin nervously. He kept everything in a locked drawer in his desk. Called it his insurance policy. Said if anything ever happened to him, I should take it to the FBI. But he disappeared before anything could happen. Megan nodded. One day he was just gone. His drawer was empty. Everything was gone. When the FBI came around asking questions a few weeks later, I had nothing to give them. Armed with this new information, I prepared for my next encounter with Raymond Blackwell. The following Tuesday, I purposely switched sections with another server to ensure I would be working table 7. At precisely 8 o'clock, Raymond arrived with 3 associates, different ones than the night I'd recognized his signature. I maintained my professional demeanor throughout the meal, making no indication that anything was amiss. I waited for the perfect moment when his companions excused themselves to make calls or use the restroom. With just Raymond at the table, I approached to refill his water. Can I get you anything else, Mr. Blackwell? I asked, using the name that wasn't truly his. No, thank you, he replied, barely glancing up from his phone. I leaned slightly closer, keeping my voice low but clear. I know who you are, William Cooper. His fingers froze over his screen. Slowly, he looked up at me, his face a perfect mask of confusion that didn't reach his eyes. Excuse me? You heard me. I know who you are, and I know what you did. The mask slipped for just a second, shock, then calculation flashed across his features before he composed himself again. I don't know what you're talking about. My name is Raymond Blackwell. Is it? That's not what your signature says. I straightened up as I saw his associates returning. We'll be talking again soon. Dad. I walked away, feeling his eyes burning into my back. As I cleared a nearby table, I could see him examining the water glass I'd just filled, probably checking if I'd somehow tampered with it. Before I finished my shift, I slipped a small envelope onto his table while clearing dessert plates. Inside was a copy of our last family photo before he disappeared, Mom, him, and 12-year-old me at the beach, all smiling at the camera without any idea of what was coming. From across the restaurant, I watched as he opened it, his face paling slightly as he stared at the photograph. Then, with deliberate movements, he tucked it into his suit pocket, pulled out his phone, and made a call. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could read his lips as he spoke the words that sent a chill down my spine. We have a situation that needs handling. It's personal. I'd made my move. I'd let him know that I knew. But as I watched him end his call, the cold, calculated look in his eyes made me realize I was now in danger. Yet somehow, that only strengthened my resolve. The man who had abandoned us and built a fortune while we struggled was finally going to face consequences for what he'd done. I knew I'd set something in motion that couldn't be stopped, but I wasn't prepared for how quickly things would escalate. 3 days after my confrontation with Raymond, I returned home from a late shift to find something wrong with my apartment. Nothing valuable was missing, not my laptop, not the small amount of cash I kept in a drawer, not even the decent jewelry I'd inherited from my grandmother. But things were off. The stack of mail on my counter was too neat. A photo frame was tilted at a different angle. My bedroom closet doors were closed, though I always left them slightly ajar. Someone had been here, looking through my things. I barely slept that night, pushing my dresser in front of the door and jumping at every sound from the street below. The next morning, I called my landlord and had the locks changed, claiming I'd lost my keys. That was just the beginning. Over the next week, I felt eyes on me everywhere I went. A black sedan would be parked across from my apartment building when I left for work, gone when I returned. On the subway, the same man in a gray suit got on and off at the same stops as me for 3 days in a row, never making eye contact. Then the text messages started. From unknown numbers that changed each time. You're making a mistake. Some questions are better left unasked. Your mother wouldn't want you doing this. That last one sent ice through my veins. They were watching Mom too. I rushed to her apartment that evening, nearly colliding with the EMTs wheeling a stretcher out of her building. My heart stopped when I saw her on it. Mom. What happened? I grabbed her hand as the paramedics paused. She fell down the stairs, miss, one of them explained. A neighbor found her and called 911. Mom's eyes fluttered open, confusion evident on her face. Abby? I don't remember falling. At the hospital, the doctors found no serious injuries, just bruising and a mild concussion. They attributed her memory lapse to the head injury and shock. But I knew better. This was no accident. While Mom was being examined, I used her phone to check her recent calls and messages, looking for any threats similar to what I'd received. Instead, I found something unexpected: regular incoming transfers from an offshore account to her checking account, dating back 5 years. Small amounts, just enough to supplement her disability payments and help with medical expenses. When we were finally alone in her hospital room, I confronted her. Mom, how long have you been receiving money from him? Her eyes widened with fear. What are you talking about? I showed her the banking app on her phone, the transaction history clearly displayed. 5 years, Mom. He's been sending you money for 5 years. Did you know it was him? Her eyes filled with tears. Abby, please understand. Understand what? That you've been in contact with him while letting me think he was dead? While I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college? While I dropped out to take care of you? No. It wasn't like that. She grabbed my hand desperately. The money just started coming. Anonymous deposits. I didn't know for sure who it was from, but I suspected. And you never told me. What good would it have done? Would it have brought him back? Would it have made up for the years we struggled? Her voice softened. I needed that money, Abby. For the treatments insurance wouldn't cover. I couldn't turn it away, even if it was blood money. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process this new betrayal. What really happened back then, Mom? I need to know everything. She stared at the ceiling for a long moment before speaking. William was involved in something bad at his firm. Investment fraud. He told me he was being framed by more powerful executives, but he had evidence to prove his innocence. She closed her eyes, the memory clearly painful. He said people were threatening him, threatening us. He said he needed to disappear for a while, to protect us while he gathered more evidence. And you believed him? He was my husband, Abby. Your father. Of course I believed him. Her voice cracked. He promised he'd come back when it was safe, that he'd expose the real criminals and make everything right. But he never came back. No. The weeks turned into months, then years. No word, no contact. I gave up hope. She opened her eyes, looking at me directly. Then 5 years ago, the deposit started. No name, no message. Just money when we needed it most. Why didn't you try to find him? I was afraid, Abby. Afraid of what I might find out. Afraid for you. She squeezed my hand. Whatever you're doing now, whatever you've stirred up, it's dangerous. These people, they don't play by normal rules. The accident and my mother's revelations only strengthened my resolve. If they were willing to hurt my mother to scare me off, I needed to find leverage, and fast. I connected with a journalist named Rebecca Winters who had written several articles on financial crimes years ago, including a piece mentioning Lambert and Pierce. We met at a noisy diner in Queens, far from my usual haunts. Rebecca was in her 50s, with sharp eyes behind stylish glasses and the nervous energy of someone who drank too much coffee. She listened intently as I shared what I'd discovered so far, occasionally jotting notes in a small notebook. Lambert and Pierce, she said when I finished. That takes me back. It was the one that got away. What do you mean? I spent months investigating that story. It was a massive fraud scheme, over $200 million stolen from investors through falsified returns and misappropriated funds. She tapped her pen on the table. But the case fell apart. Key witnesses disappeared or suddenly recanted. Evidence vanished. The whole investigation was quietly dropped. And my father? William Cooper? I suspected he was one of the key players, but could never prove it. He vanished right when things were heating up. She studied my face carefully. And now you're saying he resurfaced as Raymond Blackwell? Yes. Same signature, same physical features once you look past the hair dye and styled beard. But I need proof, concrete evidence that links William Cooper to Raymond Blackwell and to the fraud at Lambert and Pierce. Rebecca sipped her coffee thoughtfully. Have you considered that your father might have taken evidence with him when he disappeared? The kind of documentation that could either incriminate him or prove his innocence? That night, I searched through the box of my father's belongings again, examining every item meticulously. In the lining of an old leather planner, I found something I'd missed before, a small key taped inside with a series of numbers written beside it, 7214 BCU. A safe deposit box key. It took days of calling banks around the city, inquiring about their numbering systems. Finally, a teller at Broadway Central Union Bank recognized the format as theirs. With my ID showing my Cooper last name and my father's death certificate, which Mom had obtained years ago when it became necessary for legal matters, I managed to convince the bank manager to let me access the box. My hands trembled as I inserted the key. Inside, I found a USB drive, my father's original passport and birth certificate, and an envelope addressed simply, "My dearest Abigail." The letter was dated just 1 month after his disappearance. My dearest Abigail. If you're reading this, something has happened to me, or enough time has passed that you've gone looking for answers. I owe you those answers, though they may not bring you peace. I discovered something terrible at Lambert and Pierce, a massive fraud scheme orchestrated by the senior partners. They were stealing from our clients, falsifying investment returns, and laundering the money through offshore accounts. When I confronted them with my suspicions, they made it clear what would happen if I went public. Not just my career, but my family's safety was at stake. These aren't idle threats. Kenneth was my friend and ally in gathering evidence. By the time you read this, you may already know what happened to him. I've compiled everything on the enclosed drive: account numbers, transaction records, recorded conversations, names of everyone involved. I had to disappear to finish gathering this evidence from a position of safety. I promise you, I'm coming back. I'll make this right for you and your mother. I just need more time to ensure we'll all be protected when the truth comes out. I love you, Abigail. More than you can know. The hardest part of this nightmare is being away from you and your mother. Please tell her I love her and I'm sorry for the pain I'm causing. It's temporary. I promise. Always. Dad. I read the letter 3 times, emotions warring inside me. This was his perspective, his justification. He claimed to be a whistleblower, not a criminal. He promised to return when it was safe. But 15 years had passed, and in that time, he'd become a billionaire while we lost everything. The USB drive was my next focus. I couldn't risk examining it on my own computer in case it was being monitored. I reached out to Jason Reeves, an IT expert friend from my college days who now worked in cybersecurity. This is some serious encryption, Jason said after connecting the drive to his specialized laptop in his secure home office. Military-grade stuff. It'll take me a few days to crack it safely. How soon can you start? I'll work on it tonight. I'll call you when I have something. 2 days later, my phone rang at 3 a.m. Jason's voice was tense, almost frightened. You need to see what's on this drive. And Abigail, be careful who you trust. This is bigger than your father. Jason's apartment was in a converted industrial building in Bushwick, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and pipes running across the ceiling. When I arrived, his eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, and empty energy drink cans littered his desk. I haven't slept since I called you, he said, leading me to his workstation where multiple monitors displayed fragments of documents, spreadsheets, and what looked like email chains. This stuff, it's like something out of a movie. He pulled up a folder containing hundreds of files meticulously organized by date and type. Your father was thorough, I'll give him that. There are emails, financial records, account numbers, recorded conversations, everything needed to expose a massive fraud scheme. I scrolled through documents showing falsified investment returns, wire transfers to offshore accounts, and communications between Lambert and Pierce executives discussing how to hide losses from investors. Look at the names, Jason said, pointing at a spreadsheet. These aren't just random investment bankers. There are politicians, judges, even an FBI assistant director on this list of beneficiaries. My eyes widened as I recognized some of the names, people who now held even higher offices, controlled regulatory agencies, sat on federal benches. There's more, Jason said, clicking to another folder. These files document what happened to Kenneth Reynolds. The folder contained surveillance photos, phone records, and an email thread discussing the Reynolds problem and how it needed to be permanently resolved. The final email simply read, "Problem handled. Staged as discussed." They murdered him, I whispered, feeling sick. And made it look like suicide. And they would have done the same to your father if they caught him, Jason noted. According to these files, they had people in the police department, the district attorney's office, even federal agencies. There was nowhere he could safely go with this information. But the most shocking revelation came in the last folder Jason opened, Blackwell Financials. This is where it gets complicated, he said, pulling up a series of documents. These show how your father established his new identity as Raymond Blackwell. He used connections from someone named Victor Mercer to create a completely new background and credentials. I leaned closer, hardly able to believe what I was seeing. But where did he get the money to start Blackwell Industries? Jason's expression was grim as he pulled up another spreadsheet. That's the thing, Abigail. He used the same stolen investor funds he was supposedly gathering evidence against. He diverted nearly $50 million to accounts only he could access, then used that money to establish his new empire. The truth hit me like a physical blow. My father had started as a whistleblower, genuinely horrified by the fraud he'd discovered. But somewhere along the way, he'd seen an opportunity and taken it. He'd used the stolen money and his knowledge of the financial system to build Blackwell Industries and become one of the wealthiest men in America. He became exactly what he was fighting against, I said, my voice hollow. There's one more thing you should see, Jason said quietly, pulling up a folder labeled Cooper Family. Inside were surveillance photos of Mom and me over the years, at my high school graduation, moving into my college dorm, Mom at various doctor's appointments. He was watching us the whole time, I realized. All these years, he knew exactly what we were going through, and he did nothing until 5 years ago. I left Jason's apartment with a copy of the USB contents, my mind reeling from these revelations. My father hadn't been kidnapped or killed. He hadn't been forced to stay away to protect us. He'd chosen to become Raymond Blackwell, to build a fortune on stolen money while his family struggled in poverty. Back at my apartment, I barely had time to hide the USB copy before there was a knock at my door. Through the peephole, I saw a tall man in his 40s, with close-cropped hair and the bearing of someone with military or law enforcement background. Ms. Cooper? My name is Victor Hayes. I'm head of security for Raymond Blackwell. My heart raced. How had they found me so quickly? Had Jason's security been compromised? I have nothing to say to Raymond Blackwell or anyone who works for him, I called through the door. I think you'll want to hear what I have to say, he replied calmly. I'm not who you think I am. And neither is your father. Against my better judgment, I opened the door but kept the chain on. What does that mean? He glanced down the hallway before answering. I'm not actually Blackwell's head of security. I'm Special Agent Victor Hayes, FBI. I've been undercover in Blackwell Industries for 3 years, building a case. I stared at him skeptically. Prove it. He slid an FBI badge through the gap in the door. It looked authentic, but I wasn't taking chances. If you're FBI, why are you coming to me instead of arresting him? Because we need more evidence to make the case stick. Blackwell is connected to powerful people who can make investigations disappear. His eyes met mine directly. I know you've accessed your father's safe deposit box. I know about the USB drive. I tensed. How? We've been monitoring the box for years, hoping someone would lead us to the evidence William Cooper took when he disappeared. He lowered his voice. Your father started as a whistleblower but got corrupted along the way. Now he's protecting the same people he once tried to expose. I hesitated, still not fully trusting him. What do you want from me? Cooperation. You have what we need, the personal connection and missing evidence. Together, we can finally bring down not just Raymond Blackwell, but the entire network he's part of. After further conversation and verification of his identity through means he suggested, calling the FBI field office on my own phone and asking for him by his badge number, I cautiously agreed to work with Victor. The plan was elaborate but necessary given Blackwell's resources and connections. A major charity gala was happening the following weekend, one where Raymond Blackwell would be receiving a humanitarian award for his philanthropic work. The irony wasn't lost on me. Victor would attend as part of Blackwell's security detail, and I would go as a server hired through the catering company working the event. The real goal, Victor explained, is to get access to Blackwell's private server at the company headquarters. While you create a distraction by confronting him publicly at the gala, I'll use the security protocols to access the executive level and copy the files we need. Won't that put me in danger? I asked. We'll have agents positioned throughout the event. You'll be protected, he assured me. But this might be our only chance to access those servers while most of the security team is at the gala. The night of the event arrived. The gala was being held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, transformed for the evening into a glittering showcase of wealth and power. I wore the standard black uniform of the catering staff, my hair pulled back tightly, trying to blend in while keeping Raymond in my sights. He moved through the crowd confidently, shaking hands and accepting congratulations, completely unaware that I was just feet away, watching his every move. Victor was nearby, part of the security team scanning the room, occasionally making eye contact with me to signal that everything was proceeding as planned. The moment came when Raymond took the stage to accept his award. As he began his speech about giving back to the community, I moved into position. When he finished to applause and stepped down from the podium, I approached him with a tray of champagne. "Congratulations, Mr. Blackwell," I said loudly as he reached for a glass. "Or should I call you Dad?" The guests nearby fell silent. Raymond's face froze in a mixture of shock and anger. "This man is a fraud," I continued, my voice carrying across the now hushed ballroom. "His real name is William Cooper. He abandoned his family 15 years ago and stole millions to create his new identity." Security guards moved toward me immediately, but I kept speaking, creating exactly the scene Victor needed. "Ask him about Lambert and Pierce. Ask him about Kenneth Reynolds." Two guards grabbed my arms, pulling me away as the room erupted in murmurs and shocked gasps. Raymond recovered quickly, forcing a laugh and saying something about unstable people seeking attention. As I was escorted out, I caught a glimpse of Victor slipping away through a service entrance. I was released outside the museum with a warning not to return. For 2 hours, I paced nearby, waiting for Victor's call as planned. It never came. By midnight, I returned to my apartment, worried that something had gone wrong. I tried the contact number Victor had given me, but it went straight to voicemail. Had he been caught? Was the whole operation compromised? The answer came the next morning when I woke to find my apartment door unlocked, though I distinctly remembered locking it, and a note on my kitchen table. The operation was a success. Thank you for your assistance. For your own safety, destroy any copies of the evidence you have and forget what you know. This matter is now under federal jurisdiction. It wasn't signed, but the handwriting matched Victor's notes from our planning sessions. Something felt wrong. If the operation had been successful, why hadn't Victor contacted me directly? Why leave a cryptic note instead of explaining the next steps? My suspicions were confirmed when I checked the hiding place where I'd stored my copy of the USB files. It was gone. I had been used, potentially exposed myself for nothing, and now had no evidence to back up my claims. Victor had disappeared with the copied files, and I had no way to contact him. Had he actually been FBI, or had this been an elaborate scheme by my father to identify and neutralize the threat I posed? That night, my phone rang at 2 a.m. An unknown number. "You should have heeded the warnings, Abigail," said a voice I didn't recognize. "Now it's too late." Before I could respond, the caller hung up. Seconds later, my phone buzzed with a notification from the security system app I'd installed at Mom's apartment after her accident. The alarm had been triggered. I broke every traffic law driving to Mom's apartment. Police cars and an ambulance were already outside the building when I arrived, their lights painting the night in alternating red and blue. My heart hammering, I pushed past the officer at the entrance, showing my ID and crying out that it was my mother's apartment. "Ma'am, you need to calm down," a detective said, intercepting me in the hallway. "The apartment appears to have been broken into, but we haven't found anyone inside." "My mother? Where's my mother?" My voice was shrill with panic. "That's what we're trying to determine. There are signs of a struggle, but no blood or..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "No evidence of severe violence." They let me into the apartment. It had been ransacked, furniture overturned, drawers emptied onto the floor, Mom's medication scattered across the kitchen counter. On the refrigerator door, held by a magnet, was a note that made my blood run cold. "The Marina Club. Midnight. Come alone or she dies." I showed it to the detective, who immediately called for additional units and began talking about safe houses and protective custody. But I knew conventional police protection wouldn't help. If my father was connected to the powerful people I suspected, no police department would be safe. "I appreciate your concern, detective, but I need some time alone to process this," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "I'm going to stay with a friend tonight. I'll call you if I hear anything from my mother." He tried to argue, but I was firm. Once they finally left, with promises to patrol the area and continue the investigation, I sat in the destroyed apartment and considered my options. I had no evidence, no allies I could trust, and now they had my mother. There was only one choice. The Marina Club was an exclusive establishment on the Hudson River, accessible only to members with connections and seven-figure bank accounts. At 11:45 p.m., I approached the gleaming building, having changed into the most professional outfit I owned, a black pantsuit I'd worn to job interviews. The security guard at the entrance stopped me immediately. "Member ID, please." "I'm here to see Raymond Blackwell," I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "He's expecting me." The guard made a call, speaking quietly into his earpiece. After a moment, he nodded and directed me through the lobby to a private elevator. "Penthouse level. They're waiting for you." The elevator opened directly into a luxurious lounge with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river and the glittering city beyond. Raymond Blackwell stood by the window, a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. Beside him was a tall man I recognized as his actual head of security, Marshall Stone, whose reputation for ruthless efficiency was well known in financial circles. "Abigail," Raymond said, his voice pleasant as if we were meeting for a casual dinner. "Thank you for coming. Drink?" He gestured to a bar cart nearby. "Where's my mother?" I demanded, remaining near the elevator. "She's safe. For now." He nodded to Stone, who touched his earpiece and spoke quietly. "Show her." A door opened, and my mother was led in by another security guard. She looked frightened but unharmed, still wearing her nightgown with a robe hastily thrown over it. "Mom." I moved toward her, but Stone stepped between us. "Not yet. First, we talk." I locked eyes with my mother, trying to communicate reassurance I didn't feel. "Are you okay?" She nodded, her eyes darting nervously to Raymond. "Abby, I'm so sorry." "That's enough," Raymond interrupted. He turned to me, all pretense of pleasantness gone. "You've become quite the problem, Abigail. Breaking into my past, interfering with my business, making public accusations. You were supposed to protect us, not abandon us." I snapped, years of hurt and anger bubbling to the surface. "You left us with nothing while you built an empire." "I did what was necessary," he replied coldly. "The situation was more complicated than you could understand." "I understand perfectly. You were gathering evidence against corrupt executives, but then saw an opportunity. Instead of exposing them, you joined them. You used stolen money to create Raymond Blackwell while your family lost everything." A flash of something, regret? Anger? Crossed his face before the mask returned. "I've been sending your mother money. What more did you want?" What more did I want? I was almost shouting now. How about a father? How about not watching my mother work herself into illness to keep a roof over our heads? How about not having to drop out of college because we couldn't afford it? "You became everything you claimed to be fighting against," I continued, my voice shaking with emotion. "You're no better than the people you were supposedly gathering evidence against. At least they didn't abandon their families." Raymond's jaw tightened, the only sign that my words had hit their mark. Stone cleared his throat, reminding his boss of the purpose of this meeting. "Yes, well, this has been sufficiently dramatic," Raymond said, setting down his glass. "Now to business." He gestured to a folder on the glass coffee table. "Inside you'll find a non-disclosure agreement and transfer documents for $5 million to an offshore account in your name." I stared at the folder, then back at him. "You think you can buy me off?" "It's more than fair," he replied. $5 million to forget what you think you know. To never contact me again. To never speak about William Cooper or Lambert and Pierce to anyone." He smiled thinly. "Think about it, Abigail. You could finish your degree. Buy your mother a nice house. Get the medical care she needs. All you have to do is sign and walk away." I looked at my mother, seeing the fear in her eyes. This wasn't just about money, it was about our survival. But something in her expression told me not to trust this offer. "I want to speak with my mother first," I said. "Alone?" Raymond considered this, then nodded to Stone. 5 minutes. In the next room." The guard escorted us to a smaller sitting room and stood outside the door, which remained partially open. I hugged my mother tightly, feeling how thin she'd become. "Are you really okay? Did they hurt you?" I whispered. "I'm fine," she assured me, her voice barely audible. "But Abby, don't trust him. He'll never let us go." "What do you mean?" She glanced nervously at the door. "I heard them talking when they thought I was asleep. Once you sign those papers, we become loose ends. That's what the security man called us." A chill ran through me as I realized what she was saying. My father planned to eliminate both of us regardless of any agreement. We knew too much, posed too great a risk to his carefully constructed life. My mind raced for a solution. I had no evidence, no leverage, no way to ensure our safety. Then an idea struck me, desperate and dangerous, but possibly our only chance. When we returned to the main room, I approached the coffee table and picked up the folder, pretending to review the documents inside. "Before I sign anything," I said carefully, "you should know that I've taken precautions. Everything I've discovered about William Cooper and Raymond Blackwell, the USB files, the safe deposit box contents, everything, has been copied and left with my lawyer." I looked him directly in the eye. "With instructions to release it all to the press and the authorities if anything happens to either of us." Raymond's expression didn't change, but I saw Stone shift uncomfortably. "You're bluffing," Raymond said after a moment. "Am I? You taught me well, Dad. Always have insurance." I used his own terminology deliberately. "Kill us, and everything goes public automatically." "Your choice." For several tense seconds, nobody spoke. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't call my bluff. Finally, Raymond gave a curt nod. "A reasonable precaution. Perhaps we need to reconsider our approach." "Here's mine," I said, setting down the folder unopened. "I need time to review these documents properly, with legal counsel." 24 hours. "Impossible," Stone interjected. "This needs to be resolved tonight." 24 hours, I repeated firmly. "Or my lawyer releases everything immediately." Another tense silence. Then Raymond nodded again. 24 hours. "Then I expect full cooperation, or the consequences will be severe." They allowed us to leave together, Stone escorting us to the entrance where a car was waiting. As we drove away, I whispered to my mother, "I have a plan. We're going to take everything from him." The first thing I did was take Mom to the emergency room. The stress and fear of her abduction had exacerbated her autoimmune condition, and the doctor recommended a mild sedative to help with her anxiety. As she rested in the hospital bed, I took her phone and began searching through it, looking for any clue that might help us. In her text messages, I found something strange, a series of drafted but unsent messages to an unknown number. They contained coded updates about WC's movements and RB's activities, William Cooper and Raymond Blackwell. When Mom woke up, I showed her the drafts. Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know who else to turn to," she admitted. "About 7 years ago, a woman approached me. She showed me FBI credentials and said they were building a case against Raymond Blackwell." Mom twisted the hospital blanket in her hands. "I didn't believe William and Raymond were the same person at first, but she had photos, evidence." "What was her name?" I asked, my mind racing. "Agent Sophia Martinez. She gave me her number, told me to keep notes but never to actually send them. She'd check the drafts folder remotely." Mom looked at me anxiously. "I was afraid to tell you. Afraid it would put you in danger." I used Mom's phone to call the number from the draft messages. After 3 rings, a woman's voice answered cautiously, "Helen Cooper?" "No, this is Abigail Cooper, Helen's daughter," I replied. "I need to speak with Agent Martinez immediately. It's an emergency." 20 minutes later, a Latina woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor entered the hospital room, showing her FBI credentials to the nurse before closing the door behind her. "I'm Agent Martinez," she said, her gaze assessing me quickly. "You've stirred up quite a hornet's nest, Ms. Cooper." I explained everything, finding my father's signature, discovering his true identity, the USB drive, Victor Hayes, and the ultimatum from Raymond. Martinez's expression darkened when I mentioned Hayes. There is no FBI agent named Victor Hayes working on this case. He's likely working for your father, identifying potential threats. So I was set up? He used me to find the evidence? She nodded grimly. We've been watching Blackwell for years, but could never get solid evidence. His connections run deep: judges, politicians, federal officials. Every time we get close, the investigation gets shut down from above. Then why are you still on the case? Because some of us believe in justice more than career advancement. Her expression softened slightly. Your mother has been helping us build a parallel investigation, off the books. We're gathering evidence to take down not just Blackwell, but the entire network he's part of. I had the evidence, I said bitterly. Everything was on that USB drive, but Hayes took it. Maybe not everything, Martinez said thoughtfully. Tell me exactly what was in your father's safe deposit box. We spent the next hour planning. With less than 18 hours left before Raymond's deadline, we developed a strategy that was risky but might be our only chance. I would appear to surrender, wearing a wire to record any incriminating statements. Martinez would assemble a small team of agents she trusted absolutely, people outside the usual chain of command who couldn't be compromised. We'll be monitoring your conversation, she explained. The moment we have enough evidence on tape, we move in. Will it work? I asked, fear and doubt creeping in. He's so powerful, so connected. It has to work, Martinez replied simply. Because if it doesn't, you and your mother will never be safe. We left Mom under guard at the hospital, 2 agents posing as private security hired by the family, and I prepared for the confrontation. The meeting was set for 9 p.m. at Raymond's penthouse office in the Blackwell Tower. I dressed conservatively, wearing a blazer that concealed the sophisticated recording device Martinez had provided. Remember, she said as her team did final checks on the equipment, we need him to explicitly admit to his crimes. Get him talking about Lambert and Pierce, about Kenneth Reynolds, about the money he stole. What if he searches me for a wire? The device is undetectable by standard scanners. Just don't let them strip search you. She squeezed my arm reassuringly. We'll have a team in the building, and backup units ready to move in. You won't be alone. At 8:55 p.m., I entered Blackwell Tower, my heart pounding so hard I was sure the security guards would hear it. I was escorted directly to the executive elevator, which required keycard access to reach the top floors. The agent accompanying me swiped his card, pressed the button for the 60th floor, then exited, leaving me alone as the doors closed. Raymond was waiting in his office, a vast space with one wall entirely of glass, offering a panoramic view of Manhattan at night. Stone stood nearby, as did another security guard by the door. Right on time, Raymond said, not bothering with pleasantries. Do you have the documents? I removed a USB drive from my pocket, a decoy Martinez had prepared, and placed it on his desk alongside a signed NDA. Everything I found is on there, I said. And I've signed your agreement. Raymond picked up the NDA, examining my signature carefully. And your lawyer? The one with the supposed copies? The copies will be destroyed once you confirm the transfer. He studied me for a moment, then nodded to Stone. Check her for wires. My heart jumped to my throat as Stone approached with a handheld scanner. Martinez had assured me the device was undetectable, but what if she was wrong? Stone ran the scanner over me professionally, paying special attention to my midsection and the collar of my blazer. She's clean, he confirmed. Raymond seemed to relax slightly. Now, let's make sure this USB actually contains what you claim. He inserted the drive into his computer, quickly scanning through the files. His expression darkened as he realized they were encrypted. What's the password? Transfer the money first, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Then I'll give you the password and destroy all other copies. He made a call, speaking briefly with someone about authorizing a transfer. While we waited, I decided to implement Martinez's plan, get him talking on record. I have a question, I said, keeping my tone conversational. Were you always planning to become Raymond Blackwell, or was that a decision you made after stealing the money from Lambert and Pierce? His eyes narrowed. Careful, Abigail. I'm just curious. Was Kenneth Reynolds part of the plan too, or was his death just a convenient way to silence a witness? That struck a nerve. Kenneth made his choice, Raymond said coldly. He was going to ruin everything, expose everyone. The senior partners couldn't allow that. So you knew they were going to kill him? I didn't know the specifics. But I knew they would handle the problem. His expression hardened. That's what made me realize I was on the wrong side. Fighting against people like that was futile. Better to use what I knew to build something for myself. By stealing the money yourself. A tight smile. I prefer to think of it as compensation for my silence. The investors were already defrauded, their money was gone regardless. I simply diverted some of it before it reached the partners' pockets. And what about us? Mom and me? Were we just collateral damage in your reinvention? Something flickered in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or just annoyance at the question. It was complicated. At first, I genuinely planned to gather evidence and return. But as opportunities presented themselves, as Blackwell Industries grew, returning became more difficult. You mean you got rich and decided we weren't worth the trouble anymore? I built an empire, he snapped, his composure cracking. Do you have any idea how difficult that is? The sacrifices required? I couldn't risk everything I'd built by maintaining connections to my old life. So you watched us struggle from afar. Watched Mom get sick. Watched me drop out of college to care for her. I sent money when I could do so safely, he said defensively. I built Blackwell Industries in part to eventually protect both of you. 15 years later? After the damage was done? I shook my head in disgust. You know what the worst part is? You're still lying to yourself. You didn't do this for us. You did it for yourself. Before he could respond, his computer chimed with a notification. The transfer was complete. $5 million, as agreed, he said, regaining his composure. Now, the password. I gave him the password Martinez had created. As he entered it, I felt a surge of triumph. We had him on tape admitting to knowledge of Kenneth Reynolds' murder and the theft of investor funds. Any moment now, Martinez and her team would burst in. As Raymond examined the now accessible files, his face hardened. These aren't the complete files. Where are the rest? That's everything I have, I lied. The original USB from the safe deposit box. He was about to respond when the office door opened. I turned, expecting to see Martinez and her agents. Instead, a distinguished older man in an expensive suit entered, followed by two more agents who were definitely not part of Martinez's team. Assistant Director Wilson, Raymond said, standing. Perfect timing. Mr. Blackwell, the man nodded, then turned to me. Abigail Cooper? I'm Assistant Director Wilson, FBI. I believe you've been working with one of my agents, Sophia Martinez. My blood ran cold. This wasn't part of the plan. Where was Martinez? I'm afraid Agent Martinez has been operating outside her authority, Wilson continued smoothly. This investigation has been officially closed due to national security concerns. National security? I repeated incredulously. What does financial fraud have to do with national security? That's classified information, Ms. Cooper. Wilson turned to the agents with him. Secure the recording device Ms. Cooper is wearing and any evidence she may have brought. One of the agents approached me. I backed away. This isn't right. You're supposed to be enforcing the law, not protecting criminals. The situation is more complex than you understand, Wilson said dismissively. Mr. Blackwell is a valuable asset to certain government interests. His companies provide essential services and technologies to several federal agencies. As the agent removed my recording device, I watched Raymond's expression change from concern to smug satisfaction. "Did you really think someone like you could bring down someone like me?" he asked quietly. The agents confiscated the decoy USB drive and my phone, then Wilson instructed Stone to escort me out of the building. As we walked to the elevator, I caught sight of Martinez being led toward another office by Wilson's agents, her expression a mixture of fury and defeat. As the elevator doors began to close, our eyes met briefly. And in that moment, I saw something unexpected in her gaze, not defeat, but determination. A small, almost imperceptible nod. The plan had failed, but not everything was as it seemed. As the elevator descended, I touched the lining of my blazer where the second, much smaller recording device Martinez had given me as a backup was still safely hidden. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to win the game," I whispered to myself as the elevator reached the ground floor. 1 week later, I was back at the Ivory, serving overpriced wine to overpaid executives as if nothing had happened. Gordon, the manager, had reluctantly taken me back after I claimed a family emergency had caused my absence. In reality, I'd spent those days in a safe house with Mom, waiting for Martinez's signal. The restaurant television, normally tuned to financial news for the benefit of our Wall Street clientele, suddenly caught everyone's attention as the programming was interrupted by breaking news. "We're coming to you live as FBI agents raid the headquarters of Blackwell Industries," the reporter announced, standing in front of the familiar tower where I'd met with Raymond just days earlier. According to sources, CEO Raymond Blackwell and several high-ranking executives are being taken into custody in connection with what authorities are calling one of the largest financial crime networks ever uncovered in American history. The restaurant erupted in shocked conversations. I stood frozen, watching as footage showed Raymond being escorted from the building in handcuffs, his face a mask of cold fury. What the public didn't know, what even Raymond didn't know, was that our apparent defeat had been part of a more elaborate plan. After Martinez realized how deeply the corruption ran, she had developed a contingency strategy. The confrontation at Raymond's office had been stage-managed to appear as a defeat while actually setting the final phase in motion. The small secondary recording device I'd worn had captured everything: Raymond's admissions, Wilson's corrupt intervention, all of it. But that alone wouldn't have been enough. The real masterstroke was what we'd done with the actual USB files. Before meeting with Raymond, I had worked with Martinez to send copies to multiple news outlets, state attorneys general, and even Interpol, all set to be released simultaneously if we didn't send a cancellation code within 24 hours. When Wilson shut down Martinez's operation, the deadlines passed, and the evidence went public from dozens of sources simultaneously. No single corrupt official could stop it. No influence could be exerted over so many independent entities at once. The story exploded across every major news outlet worldwide. After my shift ended, Martinez came to meet me. She looked exhausted but triumphant. "We did it," she said simply. 52 arrests so far, including Wilson and 3 other FBI officials, 2 federal judges, and a deputy attorney general. The case is being handled by a special prosecutor appointed directly by the president to ensure no further corruption can derail it. "And my father?" I asked. Raymond Blackwell, or William Cooper, as the indictment names him, is facing multiple life sentences. Securities fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accessory to murder in the case of Kenneth Reynolds. She smiled grimly. "He'll never walk free again." "What about the money? The investors he defrauded?" "Assets are being frozen and seized. There will be a victim compensation fund established. Your mother's medical care will be covered, by the way." I made sure of that. I felt an overwhelming mix of emotions: relief, vindication, but also a deep sadness for what could have been. "Thank you, for everything." Martinez shook her head. "You're the one who made this happen, Abigail. Your persistence broke open a case we'd been struggling with for years." She handed me a business card. "When the dust settles, call me. We could use someone with your skills and determination in the financial crimes division." 2 weeks later, I visited Raymond in the federal detention center where he awaited trial. He looked diminished in the standard-issue jumpsuit, his carefully maintained appearance beginning to slip. "Why are you here?" he asked when I sat across from him at the visitation table. "Closure, I guess," I replied honestly. "And to understand how someone could abandon their family for money." "I built something extraordinary," he said, a flash of the old arrogance returning. "Something that would have benefited you and your mother eventually." "You built it on lies and stolen dreams," I countered. "Including mine." "You'll never understand what it takes to succeed in this world," he said dismissively. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze steadily. "I understand perfectly. That's why I brought you down." Something passed across his face then, perhaps the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him, a mixture of regret and something that might have been respect. As I prepared to leave, he called after me. "Abigail. For what it's worth, I did think about you and your mother. Often." I paused at the door. "Not often enough." That evening, I sat with Mom in our new apartment, a modest but comfortable place paid for by the initial disbursement from the Victim Compensation Fund. Her health was improving with access to better medical care, and there was a lightness to her that I hadn't seen in years. "I'm proud of you," she said, reaching for my hand. "I should have been stronger for you. You shouldn't have had to fight this battle." "We both did what we thought was right," I replied, squeezing her hand. "Now we start over." With the case now public, my life had changed dramatically. I'd accepted Martinez's offer to join the FBI's Financial Crimes Division after completing my business degree. The classes I'd start next semester would have a very different meaning now, not just education for a career, but training for a mission. A letter arrived that evening, postmarked from the detention center. Mom watched anxiously as I debated whether to open it or throw it away unopened. Finally, curiosity won out. Inside was a single page in Raymond's, in William's, handwriting. "Abigail. Words cannot undo the harm I've caused, and I won't insult you with excuses. I made choices that destroyed our family, choices driven initially by fear but ultimately by greed and ambition. You deserved a father who stayed, who fought for you, who put you above everything else. Your mother deserved a husband who honored his vows. I failed you both completely. I don't expect forgiveness, nor do I deserve it. But I want you to know that watching you build the case against me, seeing your intelligence and determination, gave me something I haven't felt in 15 years, pride. Not in what I built, but in who you became despite my absence. Some debts can never be repaid, but acknowledging them is the beginning of justice. William." I folded the letter and put it away. Perhaps someday I would respond, but not yet. For now, I had a life to rebuild and a future to create, one based on truth, not lies. The signature that changed my life taught me the most important lesson: true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to stand for truth when the world tells you to look away. My father never understood that. It's why, despite all his billions, he'll die the poorest man I know. If you've ever discovered a family secret that changed everything, let me know in the comments. Was there a moment in this story that shocked you the most? Hit that like button if you were surprised when the FBI agent turned out to be corrupt. Subscribe for more real stories about justice and family, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that the truth always finds its way to the surface. Thank you all for listening, and remember, our past doesn't define us, but how we face the truth does.